Well, it's certainly a privilege to be here this morning. I hope we can cough our way through this one. And thank you for gracing me with this great privilege. When you come to Africa, everybody wants to see the big five. That's the elephant, and the lion, and the rhino, and the buffalo, and the leopard. And if you haven't seen the big five, then you haven't seen anything. And why does everybody want to see the big five? Well, the big five are sort of exciting. And there's an element of danger attached to the big five. And there's a regal aspect and power attached to the big five. And if you've ever been chased for a kilometer by an elephant, then you will know that there is an element of fear and respect associated with these creatures. So those are the big five. And when you look at a lion, have you ever been charged by a lion? I don't think anyone in Canada has been charged by a lion, have they? I was just recently in Africa, and a portion of our group was charged by a lion. That's a very scary experience. Because when a lion charges, you don't run. If you run, you end up dead. Then you are prey. When a lion charges, you get up, you stand like this, and you look him in the eye. And he'll charge up to there, if you're lucky, and stop, and growl, and turn around, and walk away. If you've survived that moment, you're fine. If you haven't, you're dead, and you don't know about it anymore. Buffalo is incredibly dangerous and unpredictable, as are rhinoceros and elephant. And a leopard, if a leopard ever charges you and you stand up and you look him in the eye, you're dead. You don't look a leopard in the eye. When a leopard is around, you make a noise. You go bong, bing, bong, whatever. But you never look at him. You always look away. And you never move fast, and you just sort of walk away. So everyone has his own character. Everyone is unique. And everyone teaches a lesson about God. A lion has something regal about him. It's not for nothing that they've made him the king of the beasts. He is powerful. He is, well, regal is the best word that you can come up with. A leopard is gorgeous, sleek, blends with the environment. And these creatures can teach us so much about God. But I don't want to talk about these big five. I want to talk about a totally different big five. And the big five I want to talk about today is the big five questions that govern life on this planet. Because they can teach us far more than the big five can. And they are far more thrilling than anything the world has to offer. And the big five are, where do I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? Why is the planet in the mess that it's in? And what is the solution? Those are the big five questions. And every single one of these questions is a science on its own. It is a huge discipline of science that involves itself with every one of these questions. And none of them seem to come up with the right answers if you don't use the guidebook. If you don't have the manual, you get lost in these five questions. Everybody knows that man is inherently inquisitive, and we're dealing with young people here. They're inquisitive. And modern schooling systems, I'm sad to say, are not geared to deal with the inquisitive mind. Modern schooling systems are geared to indoctrinate and mold and shape according to the pattern which some believe they need to dictate. God's way was always different. God's way was to learn and to experience by curiosity. And children are born with a natural curiosity. And parents have the privilege of filling that natural curiosity. I mean, the first question a child will ask when he gets to an age when he can ask questions is, where do I come from? Normally you say, go and ask your mother. And the mother will think about it and and says, I think you should ask your father. And when they come to you, you say, well, you're the result of a meiotic replicative process that ended up in the recombinant, which is you. And the kid will look at you and say, excuse me, what does that mean? I think you should ask your mother. Isn't that where we go? So where do I come from? Now there's a whole science that deals with where do we come from. And it's divided up into categories so that various individuals can become involved in the study. And when it comes down to the matter, we call it quantum physics. And if it comes to the biological process, we call it phylogeny, or call it evolution, or whatever you would like to call it. Now, quantum mechanics is a fascinating field of study. Have you ever thought about the creation week? Have you ever thought about God saying on the first day, let there be light? That's what he said. Let there be light. And then the next season it was morning and it was evening, the first day. When it comes to the sixth day, God created all the animals that are on the planet. Every single one that is on the terrestrial plane. Not the sea creatures and the flying creatures, but all the terrestrial animals, including the big five. He created them all. And if you look at the intricacy and the biology of all these creatures, from the nematodes to the annelids, to the worms, to the mammals, the reptiles, the frogs, each one so intricate, so complex. And at the end of that, he created Adam and Eve. And then they named all the animals. And then he introduced himself. Isn't that quite a process on the sixth day? What was the first day about? Let there be light. Now, excuse me, in my little pea brain, I think to myself, what's the big deal? Why did it take a whole day for God to put light into effect? If it only took him a day to create all the animals, all the nuances, all the intelligence, everything that has to deal and feel, and all the complexity of the animal and human kingdom, psyche and mind, and everything that goes with it. And he said, let there be light. Well, quantum physics tells us why light is such a big deal. Light is the basis of everything. Without light, there is nothing. And God came to this world, and the world was in darkness. Have you ever thought why this world should have been in darkness? Why would the world be in darkness? And in the midst of the darkness, God said, let there be light. And it was so. And God separated the light from the darkness. Now, where was the devil when God created this world? Probably down here, right? And therefore it was darkness, because the absence of God is darkness. Because the Bible tells us that God is light. Doesn't it say so? So the absence of God must be darkness. So in the middle of the darkness, God says, let there be light. Okay. So what was God going to do with the darkness? God was going to dispel the darkness with the light. But what is the point of dispelling the darkness with the light if there isn't something to carry the light? And who's going to represent the light, and how is the darkness going to be overcome by the presence of light? Now the physicists look at light and they're confused. Because when you break it down to its components, then light consists of photons. Photons. Now what is photon? Well, photon is a unit. Well, is it a particle? What is it? Well, obviously, it has an effect. You can bounce it against a receiving structure like they're doing right now there in the back in those cameras. And it has an effect to such an extent that it changes the chemistry of what's happening in that receiver at the end there, and will be recorded and can be displayed. So it does have an effect. But then they started to say, well, what is it? Is it something, or is it not something? And they look at it and study it, and then those famous experiments where they break it down in their mega equipment that they build, the accelerators, where they can study the subparticles individually, and the best scientific minds have been enthralled with the subject of light and never figured it out up until this day. Because the question is, where do we come from? Where do we come from? And so they take a photon and they shoot it. They have at the other end, a target with a hole. And the photon goes through the hole, and you can see the light, and it affects the screen, and it makes its mark. Aha! Then they take that same one photon, or they take one and they shoot it through two holes. And it goes through two holes. And they put 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 100 holes, and they take one photon and they shoot it through a hole, and it goes through all of them. There's something wrong here. So, is it a substance? Does it have matter? Or is it a wave? Or what is it? Well, it's a substance because you can measure it, but it's also a wave. So maybe it's there, or maybe it's not. So what are atoms? What are atoms? What do they consist of? Well, they consist of, we tell the students, they consist of neutrons, and they consist of protons, and they consist of electrons. Yeah, but what do they consist of? Well, they consist of, if you look at the neutron and you look at the proton, they consist of quarks. Okay, what's a quark? It's a combination of hadrons. What's that? Well, if you break it all down, the electron doesn't consist of quarks, but the proton and the neutron consist of quarks. How many quarks? 3 quarks. What's a quark? Well, if you break down a quark, there are up quarks and down quarks, and probably left quarks and right quarks and round quarks and whatever quarks. And when you break them down, they break down to a photon. And a photon is what? Is light. Now, is light matter? Or is light a wave? Does it exist or does it not exist? Of course it exists. We're recording it. So they want to know what it consists of. What is it? Please help us. What is it? And this is how the Big Bang theory was born. And of course it was proposed by infidels. It was proposed by Georges Lemaitre, 1931, who was a Jesuit priest and a physicist. And it is being taught throughout the world as the very origin of everything that we know. Where do we come from? We come from the Big Bang. Now, what was the Big Bang? The Big Bang was an explosion of what? Well done. In November 2014, that's the end of last year, Pope Francis said, "The Big Bang is real. God is not a magician with a magic wand." And according to the tabloids, that put an end finally to the pseudoscience that we come from a creator God. Interesting. Einstein said, as far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they are not certain. And as far as they but are certain, they do not refer to reality. In other words, what's he saying? He doesn't say, I don't know what the heck's going on. That's what he's saying. Now, the famous physicist, Michio Kaku, the Japanese quantum physicist, he has something interesting to say. He says, we do this because we want to understand our role in the universe. Why are we here? And all these people are atheists. Or Hawkins. He just recently admitted, because his family member had a near-death experience, that some form of deity must be involved, and he calls it a God factor. And the physicist Lawrence Krauss, he's a personal friend, by the way, of Richard Dawkins, who hates God with a passion, says, contrary to logic, it is not just probable that we get something out of nothing, it is absolutely inevitable. We have to get something out of nothing.